Hello, we are live, and I hope you are having a wonderful Friday. Hi. We're going to have a chat about science today, and once Mike joins us, we will, get into sort of his history and background and what's going on in his life now that he's been terminated for speaking out, as most of us have been troubled by what we've gone through with these ridiculous mandates. And just checking on my before I pull them in, I'm just going to check on my YouTube, make sure everything's good. You guys can give me a thumbs up. Yeah, it's been an insane journey for most of us. Everyone was affected by these big moves by our handlers, basically the slave owners. They're moving their chess pieces around, and we're the pawns. So we're fighting back, we're standing up for ourselves, and we're making significant changes to our lives so we can skirt around the public legal mandates, perceptions, and so forth, and move forward in the private, ultimately. Now, I'm having a little bit, I'm not able to get into YouTube, so let me just give me 2 seconds, and then we'll bring in Mike. Yeah, it won't let me sign. So what happened is actually my main YouTube channel, by the way, for all of you who found me on this YouTube channel, was terminated last week. Quite upsetting. I actually haven't even appealed yet. I've just been thinking about it, to be honest, because I'm torn. Do we want these platforms, or do we want to move along? And I have this push pull about it. So this is my backup account, but you can appeal, and then you can also, if people write YouTube and complain, there have been reversals that have happened. Do we want to do that? Is that worth it? Do we want to fight to stay on this platform? This is where I'm pondering, and I'll come to a decision at some point. So I may call upon your help for that if that's the case. So thanks for everyone. Hi, everyone coming in. Hi, Star Destiny. Someone from Amsterdam. Hi, Pablo. Hi, John. Good to see you. Australia's in the house. Awesome. My good friend Ted. Hi, Ted. Good to see you. Hi, Jessica. And hi, Jackie. Everybody's here. Good. We're going to have a fun time, I think. So let's bring on Mike, and let's have a chat, shall we, about some of the insanity that he's gone through. And if you have questions, pop them into the chats. And hey, Bearteria is here. All right. Hi, Abby. Okay, we got Michigan in the house here too. This is awesome. I'm looking forward to it. So, UK. Wow, good stuff. All right, let's get into it. Let's bring Mike on. Hey, Mike.
Hey.
Welcome. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Fantastic. I am also well, busy but well. It's a little frantic.
I can imagine.
I'm sure you're feeling the frantic energy a little bit too. Are you in a warm climate?
I'm in a very warm climate.
Like, where are
well,
you
actually, we're getting a
hailing
little
from?
bit of a break right now, but it's been really hot this summer. Oh, did you freeze?
And where are you? Are you in the United States?
Yeah, so I'm in Missouri. so in the Midwest, kind of in the center
Mhm.
of everything.
Right in the heart of it.
In the
So
heart of
you
it, yeah.
get, like, are you Tornado Alley sort of, or oh boy.
Yeah, we usually get a lot of tornadoes, but mostly very,
Well,
very hot and humid.
I'm really glad to have you. Yeah. Well, I always, sorry, go ahead. Hot and humid. Well, I always watch the Midwest for storm activity because when it comes up north, it actually goes into Ontario where I am. So oftentimes we
Mhm.
get that weather coming up that way. So, um,
Y
so, due to the maybe if you want to just give my audience a little synopsis of your research as a biotech scientist and some of the work is on HIV and things that you were involved with and how you kind of came to now, which I know you were let go, you were terminated because you refused the jibby jabby poisons, um, and which a lot of people have gone through, but not a lot of people have been brave enough to speak out. And you sound like you're passionate about talking to others about what happened, and also to encourage other scientists to also speak out and be brave. So why don't you just give us a little bit of a synopsis for us?
Yeah, so, I guess I'd say that at least I believed I was going into science for the right reasons, and I had a strong interest, and I naively thought that I could do some good and help people, and so I got a bachelor's degree in biochemistry and molecular biology from University of Massachusetts, and later on I wound up getting a master's degree in biotechnology from Johns Hopkins. And kind of my first stop was in sort of a virology lab working for an infectious disease doctor. So in a sort of an academic setting. And that's where I was working on quote unquote HIV and did that
Hmm.
for a couple years. And then I never really intended to go into industry, but one thing kind of led
Hmm.
to another. And I wound up in big pharma, um,
Hmm.
and did that for about 5 or 6 years. And then I wound up at this, it's called a contract research organization. So a lot of companies, big, small, and in between, actually outsource work now whenever they can. And so I was working at this company that basically just did work for other companies. Um, a lot of, and then more recently, I was in the biotech sector working for a company in the oncology space. So I was developing antibodies to treat cancer. And that kind of led up to about I don't know, it was end of August, early September when, pretty much industry wide, they were rolling out these mandates. And my former company joined on pretty quickly. And I didn't comply because I'm here now. And yeah, I just basically said, you know, nobody really wants this. Nobody asked for this junk we've had to put up with for the last 2.5 years. But when it comes to your doorstep, when it's, kind of what you do and how you respond is how you're defined. So I have young kids, and I just said, you know what, this is uh not maybe, what I wanted because by my not complying and losing my job, basically I was shut out of the industry. And I was questioning a lot about science and things anyway. So it's been kind of a blessing in disguise, and it's really freed me from a lot of that. And I've just looked at it as, you know what, this is a calling of something different to speak out and stand up and be, a strong role model for my kids and try to, do everything I can to give them a better future.
Now, when you went through that, did you fight back at all, or were there any lawsuits? Because I mean, being terminated for that is actually illegal. A lot of employers didn't know or don't know that. But there are a lot of lawsuits happening currently. Were you feeling like that was the right thing for you to do?
Yeah, so I'm actually I would get into more details around what happened, but I can't because I'm actually in the process of legally challenging it. So
Okay, perfect.
I have to
That
be a
I had
little
a feeling you were,
yeah.
yeah.
Oh yeah.
Um, I mean, so if anyone who's watching was wrongfully terminated for refusing what should be an option, a healthcare option, you can sue, but you do want to have a paper trail ultimately because
Mhm.
that's going to give evidence and weight in court. So, well, I wish you luck with that because it is wrong. Did you feel like financially you could do it for a while? Like, did you plan it through? Because a lot of people, I think, feel trapped and were coerced because they didn't have another option away from the job.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I think that's a huge reason why most scientists or more don't speak out because, the threat of retribution is very real. And if you do speak out and you're on the inside, you're very likely to lose your job. And again, like me, like your career. So most people just say, well, I don't want to risk that. What else would I do? But fortunately, I had a little bit of money saved up, but I don't know. I mean, it's kind of hard to look back. I mean, I don't see any amount of money or anything that would have changed my mind. I mean, I feel like this was what I had to do, and one way or another I would have found a way. But I was, fortunately I had a little bit of money saved up, and my wife's been incredibly supportive, and my kids. So, so far so good. But
How did your family, take all of that information? Because it was a lot to digest. And I don't know one family that's gotten away with, scot-free uh, out some sort of drama over a lot of these decisions and information and science. And, it's caused a lot of chaos. So how was that for your family?
fortunately, my wife and I kind of we agree on a lot of these kinds of things. So for us, it was, I mean, she was pretty much in lockstep with what when I kind of expressed that this was not something I could do and kind of went through what my concerns were and everything. She totally agreed and was supportive. But I mean, I have family, extended family and stuff that, you know, did go ahead and take the experimental treatment and stuff and didn't necessarily understand. And I have some family that I haven't even really discussed it with because I don't think they would ever understand. So, there's kind of a whole gradient, but I'm just glad that at least in my house, my wife and my kids have been understanding, and that's what matters most to me. But yeah, I think everybody's got that,
There we go. We're back.
at least some element of somebody that's close to them that's, been on the other side and not gotten it, not understood why you wouldn't just go along, why you would give up, your career and everything to stand on this. And I don't know.
Mm.
I mean,
Yeah, I mean, I feel the same way. I it wouldn't matter to me if I had to go into a cardboard box or something. It's a principle of it. It's wrong, and I don't compromise myself for with bullying. Basically, it's bullying, right?
mhm,
Um, Now, I was interested as well to find out, that you're in the biochemistry field because that's my background as well. And I totally see how it's not the pure sciences anymore in universities. Even when I was attending, I felt like we'd lost what really university was supposed to be about. It was supposed to be for higher learning, pure unbridled curiosity and designing science from almost an innocent way and an innocent mind, or have a bunch of people, have a think tank, and then come up with cool
Mhm.
ideas. I had this illusion that that's what I was going to get into when I went to university, and it was a
Mhm.
shock. Now I went into I have a BSc in agricultural biotechnology, and this was out in Alberta. And
Mhm.
so it was very geared toward food and GMO foods and all of that sort of thing. Because I know there's a lot of arenas that branch off of there, but they all end up in industry. Every one that I
Mhm.
looked
Mhm.
at, there were very few of just, the pure sciences, pure curiosity. It was all industry backed. It's all become bought out. And I think you would agree with me that this is one of the biggest problems that we have is we've lost the purity of it, where it's protected. And when you went, and graduated and had to make all these decisions, I think people have a strange idea about science. I think they imagine there's like just one big, huge bunch of universities and everyone's just like walking about in white lab coats and they're all working together and and it's not what people think. I mean, being in it, it's actually quite alarming in a way. You've got tenured professors being hired out to run experiments for industry. You have
Mhm.
all kinds of agendas there, competition, massive competition, hatred among different scientists, and
Oh,
and
yeah.
and all drama. So what kinds of experiences did you like? How did your innocence,
Mhm.
get broken by that?
Um, yeah, I mean, I totally agree with that because we have a system now that's entirely focused on industry. I mean, even in academia, it's all geared towards, you know, translating something into biotech or pharma and then develop. I mean, there is no just pure science for the sake of science. And even if you did find some school that was maybe doing more of that, nobody would care because everybody, like, it's not even just enough. What I found was to have a certain degree, but it's what school you go to. And of course, the schools that are important or that people care about are the ones,
Mm.
like in terms of grad schools, are the ones that are attached to medical schools, which of course are all, funded by the same places and everything. Um, and so, it's just all one big happy incestuous system that is not in any way, shape, or form, driving pure science anymore. And you're right, it gets really crazy. I mean, I didn't have as much exposure to academia, but you know, it is incredibly competitive. Um, I was I've always been surprised at just how competitive and how people get very territorial with their work, whether within labs and lab to lab, even if you're working on the same things. You would expect if it was all, you know, purely science and exploration that it would be much more collaborative, but people have there's no collaboration. It's so fierce, even when you get into industry, and it's so dominated by just really the system itself perpetuating itself with just trying to get new funding and feed the beast. Like, it's all about making the people that have the money happy. And I mean, a- and so someone like me that likes to ask questions doesn't always fare that well. I'm sure I missed out on a lot of opportunities and things because I just always, was a pain in the butt at meetings and things, and would ask about things. And so they were probably happy to see me go, but I don't know. It's one of those things that you see so many crazy things and, quite frankly, fraudulent things. And
Mhm.
I mean, it's not at all what the perception is from the outside. That's for sure.
Yeah, and I feel you because I'm that type of. I was always that very inquisitive student. I wanted to know why I was doing the thing and why we weren't doing it this way, which seemed more advantageous. or parsimonious or whatever. And I also, when I worked at KLAS at the University of Alberta, that's all the animal labs, all the studies on mice and rats and rabbits and all that. The vivisection was alarming as well. And I really saw a lot of regurgitation of the same studies to keep the grant money going. So they would just do whatever it took to get the grant money. And if they needed to if they didn't get the results that the pharma company wanted, they would recycle, they would change the hypothesis to recycle it slightly, or not just alter statistics, but they would alter these to massage. So they would try to get where they wanted it to be, which is, to me, that's the exact opposite of science, right? I mean, we already have the problem where we are involved with it, so our biases are there and our energy is involved, and we can skew results just by being present. You know, the double slit experiment proves that we are involved in this, right? But then there's more. Then you bring cognitive biases, illogical or logical fallacies, and poor methodologies in there. And the language of science is an issue because it's lost to most people. It's as if you are learning a second language, and I had to go through it just to. I mean, Latin helps. I actually think if we brought back Latin as absolute necessity in the trivium quadrivium sort of, teaching model, then you would understand the etymology better of the root word, and you can figure out what these big gargantuan weird names are. But to the average individual trying to read a study, it must be extremely overwhelming, and I think they've done that on purpose. And one of the things, Mike, I really appreciate about you, and I see as a very refined skill set, is translating that language for people, and so they can understand themselves and actually feel empowered as well to know, I just understood that very complicated study, and guess what? It's actually not that complicated. It's actually oh, they just did that? Oh, and they used all this fancy language? Oh, okay. So they put this with A with B and mixed it in this way, and they're just giving all the details, So do you feel that is something you are going to continue doing moving forward now that, you're coming out, you're talking about it? Like, what are your bigger goals that you feel are developing for you?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. I think the language barrier, the whole fact that it's a completely separate language with the terminology and everything. And I mean, I think you could definitely make a strong argument that it's intentional because it creates a clear barrier, and then it allows a kind of select class that's really only able to kind of interpret and hold on to this knowledge and information, which is, then it allows for what's happened the last 2 years, because then everyone else is the kind of layman, and they have to depend on the experts. And then you get then you get the people, the scientists that are saying, well, you aren't even allowed to question this stuff because you're not a scientist, you can't possibly understand it. And I just think that's the biggest bunch of bull, and it's so absurd, because like you said, when you get beyond that language and that terminology, it really does become a lot easier to understand these concepts than you would think by just looking at the terms. And a lot of people that I've talked to throughout the last 2.5 years, and even before, they'd ask me stuff, and I would start to, maybe I'd start to explain in too big of terms, and then you could see where you'd lose them. Or some people, or I'd say, well, why don't you just go, or I'd ask questions or something and say, why don't you just go look this up or whatever? And the answer you always get, well, it's easier just to ask someone like you. And I'm like, and that's really what I want to avoid. I mean, I want to not just be, another expert that's just coming out, and, I want to tell the truth about what's going on. But I think we also need solutions. So we need to continue to inform people, encourage more people to speak out on one hand, so we can continue to shine the light on all these problems and think about how do we move forward. But we also need solutions. And I think, I think if we can kind of teach this language in a way to people, and or translate it one way or the other so that they can understand it, then that breaks that barrier down, and then you can really start to dig into the research yourself, and you don't have to depend on anybody. You don't have to um hand out your thinking to some expert that doesn't have your best interests. You can understand all of this stuff and make the decisions for yourself, because that's really what's most important. And at the end of the day, I think if most people would have been able to do that, there's no way you'd make the decisions that have been made the last 2 years by so many people.
Yeah, I agree. It's difficult as well when there's a campaign to confuse and to hide truth and to shadow
Hmm.
ban and delete those who want to actually have these conversations. It's an interesting psychology when you bring something up that's different or challenging or taboo even to
Hmm.
people. It's telling when they emotionally react and won't listen rather than say, well, I know nothing of the topic. My first inclination is to deny it, but I know that's a bias of ignorance. And tell me more, Mike. I dream of that sort of
Hmm.
actual conversations. I mean, we've been challenging virologists as of late, a lot of us. I mean, I've done an outright debate with a med student, Paul Cottrell,
I saw that. Yeah.
and it's challenging because you're trying to find a common ground of communication, but when there's emotions and ego in the way, you're not really getting anywhere, and like Steve Kirsch and all of these, and Mikovits and so forth, like, what in the heck? What kind of behavior is this? This is supposed to be, when people think of scientists, they think professional, a certain type of standard of character, a certain type of cadence, a certain
Hmm.
intellect, right? Logical skills. But that's not there. That's just not there. I mean, from our experience in trying to talk with virologists, it becomes drama and like a poo slinging party. It's not like, and then we get frustrated and we go, well, how can we have a debate with this person? It's impossible, right? And then of course they'll say things like they won't debate me and da da da. And it's like, yeah, that's not really what happened. But anyway, and with, you're working with a lot of us on this, like we all are signatories to this viral challenge that really Dr. Thomas Cowan has, put forward and alongside many of us. But I know I didn't get a chance to watch you just did a live a couple days ago with Mike Stone and Andy Kaufman and Tom. How did that go? I wanted to ask people to go and look at it and think about this virus challenge, because we are challenging science paradigms here. So why don't you
Hmm.
tell us a little bit about the challenge?
Yeah. So the challenge is basically a way to, I guess the best way to put it would be to not have to keep debating in circles. It would actually finally answer the question with solid, rigorous experimentation with, of course, the proper controls, and actually blinding certain aspects of it to ensure, that you, I guess, kept bias out as much as possible. So you'd have, obviously samples from patients that were deemed to be COVID positive, but then you'd also have healthy patients. You'd have patients with um, a different type of lung disease, so lung cancer. And then I think there was another viral control, something like influenza. So you
Mm-hmm.
have all these different things. So you can rule out other contributing factors if you see something that's coming up in the quote unquote COVID patients, because most of the time what you see in these studies is they're just pretending to isolate something from a COVID patient, but there's no other set of proper controls, even just from the patient standpoint. Forget about in the experimental design. And then taking those samples and basically applying, the kinds of techniques and things that virologists do to analyze and evaluate, is there a virus present, culturing, looking for CPE, these kinds of things, and seeing if, again, these samples would be blinded, and then you're just seeing, can you identify the ones that are supposed to be COVID or whatever correctly. And you're going to do this would be done in, I think it's 5 different independent labs. So you also have not just controls, but you have independent verification, and the samples will be blinded and the labs themselves are blinded.
There
So,
you go.
this is really rigorous, well-controlled science, but it's applying the techniques that are within virology. So nobody should, in theory, have a problem with that aspect. It's not like you're asking to do something completely different. And then
Mhm.
and then the next part beyond that is to actually then do sequencing and see if you would come up with the same sequence, same genome at different independent labs. And so, this would be pretty um, strong evidence either way, right? You know, if it agreed and you identified these quote unquote viral samples, if not. And so it's, from a scientific standpoint, I think it is very clear, it's
Mhm.
straightforward, and it makes a lot of sense in terms of doing an actual set of experiments that could lead us to generate real, clear, definitive data and get an answer to this, versus just continuing in these debates that do nothing but divide and create more frustration. Although some people really like to continue to push these things, and even crazy bets and stuff. But um, so I don't know. I mean, hopefully we can find a way to make it happen. I know um, Dr. Cowan, Tom, has already got some monetary pledge. And so yesterday, as you were saying, myself and Mike Stone and Andy Kaufman went on to Tom's webinar to kind of give an update. And we were discussing um, 2 pieces of, I guess, one was a paper and one was a video. So the first thing was this paper by this Dr. Lee, who he claimed it was the unrefutable piece of data that, basically said that viruses exist. But it was all sequence data. He never isolated any particle or anything. It was entirely circular reasoning, because it
Mhm.
was, here's the, sequence, and this sequence equals virus, and virus equals sequence, and around you're going, no viral particle, no isolation. And so I went through and kind of dissected some of the methodology, because I thought there were some really big problems with the methodology. And then Andy talked a lot about the logical fallacies and did a really great job of clearly showing why, even if you were to go through the paper kind of as I did and kind of expose some of the issues from a methodology standpoint, the whole thing is kind of absurd right from the get-go, because it's a logical fallacy. You don't, so I thought we
Mhm.
did a really good job with that. And Mike Stone, had some really great points too. And then there was this video that Dr. Fleming was a clip from a presentation he did, where he was showing what he called it a video of actual SARS-CoV-2 particles, viral particles from this, it was a cryo-electron microscopy thing, but it really wasn't a video. It was basically a composition. So it's a reconstruction. And so it was, as soon as I saw it, I remembered it from a paper that a number of people have tried to use to basically debunk a bunch of us in the kind of no virus camp. And so we kind of discussed that a little bit. Dr. Cowan brought out his, I don't know if you've heard of his pumpkin challenge that's named after his cat. Yeah. So he brought that out and went through that, and that was kind of funny. And
Cool.
so it was good.
Yeah. Good, because I'm that would be maybe something even for Gemstone University. I know they want to create independent research and proper real science. It needs to be done. And I know Dr. Lanka didn't sign on to it because he believes that what he's doing will also, prove that. But the more the merrier, I think, because science needs to be repeated and we need to see, people need to see it, because they're so brainwashed into the germ theory for so many generations that if they don't get what they think they need, they're not maybe going to see it. So we know that, Thomas Kuhn wrote about the paradigm shift of science, that it happens every certain amount of years. And when you keep ignoring data, it does build up. It does become the elephant in the room. At some point, we have to turn and look at it and go, whoa, guys, I mean, this is not holding water. This is not rigorous science. If you have an infected individual, apparently is very sick, and you have to mask them, and they're just oozing virus particles because they tell us that they go through these cells randomly and kill the cell and make more copies of themselves, right? So even if you're not expressing in something supposedly doing that, there should be plenty of a sample to get just from just cough, you want to test for SARS? Here, there you go. That should be enough. But we know that they take any sample and they have to grow it now. And I'm like, why? Why would you have to take all these other tissue cultures and starve the medium and why would you need to play any game with it at all? And why isn't science sophisticated enough to take the sample as is and analyze it, just pop it right in the machine and have a look-see, right? You'd think we would be there. But that's when I started getting real suspicious. I'm like, why do we have to grow it? Why do we have to make it more? Shouldn't there be plenty from that individual? And that should be a red flag for anybody to go, yeah, that's weird, What did you use a lot of these techniques? Like, what were the techniques that you were? I know PCR and Western blot and all that. We all had to do all that shit, which I don't miss. I'll tell you,
Oh,
I didn't miss any of that stuff. But what did you focus on? What were you doing? Like, did you feel like you had to go to work and repeat a lot, or were you always doing like different things and bouncing around to different pipette stations and stuff? Like, what was it like for you in there?
Yeah, I mean, at different times it was a lot of repetitive stuff. Especially when I was working on in HIV, quote unquote. And I was kind of confronted with the same exact thing that you described. Like, I went in, and this is like 20 years or so ago, and I went in thinking kind of as a young scientist, naively, like that I thought I understood what went on in a virology lab. And I thought, oh, well, surely they isolate virus from a patient sample from blood because HIV, and then they use that to study it and understand what it is and what it's made up of, and then to test different therapeutic interventions or whatever. Nope, it was all stocks from cell cultures. So you're just constantly doing all this kind of repetitive cell culture work to generate viral stocks, and just assuming that you have a virus there. I mean, we never isolated anything, and it's all just using kind of these indirect readouts where you believe are measuring a virus, but there's no way. I mean, a lot of the tools and material, components of these indirect readouts back then especially were really poor. I mean, there were certain things that I wanted to do even, and I can remember the PI of the lab saying, well, I don't know that we can do that because those antibodies really aren't that good to that supposed target, whatever protein it was that was supposed to be in the virus or something, So there were certain even just limitations because the actual tools themselves were just not very reliable. And I mean, but everybody just assumes, oh, I've got an antibody to the the S1 spike protein or whatever, and therefore it must be. But that's not at all the case. And so yeah, I mean, I asked, well, what, what's the deal? And of course, the answer was, well, there's not enough, right? There's not enough to be able to isolate from a patient sample and study it. And so I was like, okay, well, that's, that doesn't make sense because I thought this was supposed to be making people really sick. So how come, there's not ample amounts to take and do stuff with? But I found out that, so, with HIV, there's all these tests like Western blot tests and ELISA tests for diagnosing it. And there's this whole like crazy testing paradigm because each of them alone have such a high false positive rate that they had to create this thing where, you do one and then you follow up with another one and another one and another one before you can get to a positive. But then when they're monitoring, like the amount of virus, like basically your progress or how you're responding to treatment or whatever, they do this viral load testing, and that's all PCR based. And so basically when they try to quantify like how much virus is there, they just refer to it as X amount of viral load. So they said, even at what's considered a high amount of virus or a high viral load for an HIV infection, it's actually very low. So that's why you can't. And I was like, how does that add up then? How is that supposed to be destroying somebody's quote unquote immune system and making them sick if that doesn't? And then, so we just have to rely on these viral stocks that we're making in cell lines. We're, manipulating these vectors, these DNA plasmids, and putting them into cell lines and waiting 48 hours or something. And then you just collect all the stuff and that's your viral stock. And we just assume that something's in there. And then you go and you do other experiments with that. But, it's just all assumption. But even then, it didn't sit right with me. So I, of course, go and start doing my own research. And I came across all the people questioning the HIV/AIDS paradigm, like Peter Duesberg and the Perth Group and all these people. So right from then at an early age, I just start digging in and, questioning stuff. But yeah, it's a weird situation because it's not at all like what you think it is. I mean, I still talk to people that believe that you can see viruses under just a regular microscope. They just kind of think of them almost like it should be like bacteria, right? It should work like you should be able to. They don't realize that these things are submicroscopic, and so there is no way to actually image them, without a tremendous amount of processing and manipulation.
Yeah.
So there's just this huge assumption in science and even outside of how all this stuff works. And obviously it's almost not true at all.
So really, I mean, what we should be getting into the habit of is questioning, is being inquisitive people, or playing, devil's advocate, if you will, or suspending your beliefs for the moment to question a line of thinking. And just for curiosity's sake, if we could lighten up a little bit and just go down that discourse, and just as a thought exercise, even. I mean, think, if there's a virus that's in your body, and can be in all these places, why are some airborne and some aren't, but they're explained similarly? There's nothing characteristically different about like a hepatitis or a blood, virus than a lung virus or on your skin or wherever the heck they say these things are supposed to be, right? So what they should know that. They go, well, no, those like airborne viruses, they behave completely different and they have this kind. They don't qualify any of that. I always was questioning as well, like there's so many, they said there's what, like trillions of different kinds of viruses everywhere. I mean,
Mhm.
literally, you could dust your house and you would have all
Right.
kinds of viruses sticking to your cloth. Is that
Everywhere.
so? Everywhere. So why one? Like, why do we just get one, illness? Why aren't we just teeming with just the viruses should have ate us alive by now. We should have been, when you start asking,
Mhm.
you're like, this doesn't make any sense. I would love it if private science would do right now the same sort of science that was done back in the Spanish flu time, where they
Mhm.
tried to infect, they tried to make it contagious. I like I said at the beginning of this pandemic, I said, you can come on over, you can cough in my face, you can cough right in my
Mhm.
face. Like, I'm totally cool with it. I'm not afraid of your germs, right? And that's what they did in these experiments, basically. Like, spit in my mouth, cough in my face.
Yeah.
Let's see, bring it on. Like, you want to make out, or what do you want to do, so we can like hopefully get this from each other? And and it didn't work. It didn't work.
Mhm.
I mean, and so we have like a superstition, a lot of ignorance and superstition around germs being a disease carrier causation issue, contagious issue, that it's not easy to unpin from people. And, I've had more recent frustrations where I thought I was getting somewhere with people, and then they just revert right back to the programming. They just sink right on back. You think you brought them to the light, and they're seeing, and they're, oh, and that they go right back to TV land, zombified face, and they're thinking, oh, I'm going to catch this and that, or it's frustrating. and
Oh,
this is
yeah.
like general population or scientists, doesn't matter. It's just frustrating, so.
Yeah. I think it's just been so well pounded into us from such an early age throughout all, your whole life, everywhere, your schooling and indoctrination, and then through, if you go to regular doctors and things, I mean, everyone, your parents, it's just pounded into you that that's the way it works. You get sick because of germs and because of, things that are contagious. And so you get a cold, not, you,
Mhm.
I mean, and so it becomes extremely hard to try to have somebody explore any alternative reason for why you might have gotten sick or be expressing certain symptoms, because it's just they just go right back to those ideas. And I think you're absolutely right. If we can just open this up so people can just start to question more and explore new things more and not be so locked into these old paradigms, because I mean it's so clear that it doesn't add up when you really think about it. But I think, like with COVID, like you're so kind of paralyzed by fear. I had said, you say to people like, just stop and think about this. Does this make logical sense? And some people are like, I don't know, I don't care, I just need to go, but so I don't know. I mean, I hope that we can get more people to question and think about this stuff. I mean, I would say certainly from a standpoint of science, I mean, most published research is in, at minimum it's problematic, at worst it's mostly false. I mean, there's this massive reproducibility issue. And then on top of that, most of the models that are used in preclinical research, whether it's in vitro, in a lab, in a dish, or in animal stuff, are not correlative in any way to, an actual living human. I mean, like with the virology stuff, like a dish of cells with these cell lines that are like basically immortalized cell lines, like cancer cell lines. I mean, how does that have any bearing on what's going on in a living human? I mean, that was a lot of the stuff that drove me nuts. I was like, you know, scientists would do these horrible, uncontrolled experiments and manipulate these things and get data that they were looking for, that supported their ideas or whatever, the boss wanted. And I'd be like, but what does this even mean? You know, I mean, it's great. You know, you can look at this and you can wave your hands and you can cherry pick this and get whatever you want it to say, but who cares? It doesn't tell you know, it doesn't mean anything. I don't know. They're, well, that's just the way you know, that's the only way we have to do it, or that's just, you know, like, so even scientists won't ask questions, which is always boggled my mind. But yeah, I mean, it's not all of them. They're not
No.
all in on it, but most of them are. Most of them are just, there's just so much ego and so much, you know, making a name for yourself and everything, that they're just, oh, well, it's easier to believe than poke the bear.
And I call this phenomenon the intellectual idiot, where they
Mhm.
have no inner sense or intuition. They have no gut feeling. They've cut off the tingly senses that you get from that, you know, when something feels wrong. It's like they've disassociated themselves with it. It doesn't matter if it's wrong, you know, doesn't matter if I don't like it, or it's not in my business, this sort of thing. But if more scientists would just do what you did, just go, that doesn't make sense, like, and then go and ask the question. But you know how this is. This is if you're a student, you have no right to question the scientist, because now you're a little arrogant prick who thinks they know better than the great and magnificent, you know, Dr. So
Mhm.
and so with all the letters behind the name, right? And I had my teacher, the scientist that I worked for in about my last year of university. I wouldn't. Why would I mean? If I ask him questions, he'd probably put me in the crappier job, and and hire someone else to do what I was doing, you know. And it was like,
Mhm.
and as a student, you're like, this is really cool. I'm in labs. I'm wearing a wig. I'm so smarter than everybody, and I can do I'm pipetting, and like
Yeah.
you know, and I was working in a biocontainment laboratory, biocontainment 3. So
Mhm.
it was the showering and the suiting up and the whole. And
Oh, yeah.
when I realized that I didn't need to do any of that, I just, you know, this
Mhm.
drama and the lab leaking stories around all this in the biocontainment labs and the secret lab. What on earth? I'd love to get my nose in there and see what they're really tinkering about
Mhm.
with. I mean, I would assume they're just making more biological weapons, aka shots, because they're not manufacturing whatever. I mean, because they can't. They
Right.
don't. You couldn't. And this was the problem I was getting in with Dr. Cottrell. He was adamant that COVID was a lab leak. That's what, you know. And anyone who says that they are awake and they know what's going on and they still believe that this narrative, they're not awake.
Mm-mm.
That's why dismantling the germ theory is so important. They understand that this was a testing pandemic. It was a pandemic of statistics and numbers. It had nothing to do with any new disease or anything like this. And it certainly didn't come from a lab, like this lab leak story. And it's isn't it warped how that's become something that people just go on and on about? Like even people who say that they're awake. What's your take on
Mhm.
that sort of thing?
Yeah, that drives me nuts too, because people they wanna say that they're aware of the, uh the hoax and stuff that's going on with the pandemic or the plandemic or whatever, but then they just revert right back to, well, it was a lab leak, or it was a bioweapon, or it was a this. And you're like, you're for whatever reason, you're not wanting to really see the whole thing. You know, um,
Mhm.
because it just never, I mean, that just doesn't make sense. Or the people that think that that it came from a bat or a whatever, a snake or who knows
It's a
what.
monkey, it's a bat, it's a
Yeah. I mean, that whole thing is absurd too. That's not a thing. Like that's not a thing. It's just not a
not a
thing.
thing. Where's the science for that? Where I've never found, like, I didn't find anything that
Right.
says this is how it evolves and morphs so that it, you know, it's for humans, it jumps, or these, I don't know, these vector stories are just
Yeah.
make believe, really.
Well, it's the whole idea with the animals. I mean, when you test them on animals, it doesn't do anything like what it's supposed to do in a human. And in some cases, like with HIV, you actually have to make a whole different kind of virus to put on certain animals because the human one won't do anything. I mean, it's
Interesting.
just, or you hear these stories with the old papers where they're having to, get the virus into various ways that make no sense that you'd never normally do, drill a hole in the monkey's cranium and dump some stuff in
Yes.
there, or other various orifices and things where they're putting their viral cocktails and then, oh, look, the animal got sick. Shocking.
Wow.
If somebody
You
jammed
mean
something in.
yeah, you poured like, this cocktail of actual poisons into
Right.
tissue that would normally never be exposed to such a thing and wonder why they're ill. That's what Louis Pasteur did. That was his first fraud
Mhm.
was rabies, faking a
Mhm.
dog with some scary effect in a public place to froth and then die out in front of everybody, and
Mhm.
say, I found rabies. And it's like, no, dude, you just took some rabbit tissue and some formaldehyde and some other garbage and jammed it into their skull. I mean, I would probably seize and froth at the mouth from that procedure too. So how does that prove anything? But people
Yeah.
bought it. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's easier for people when you come up with a story where there's someone or something that they can kind of pin it to and be, if it's a lab leak or if it's a bioweapon or something, there's some evil person that's behind that or whatever that you can be angry about, that you can be mad at. I mean, if it's that viruses don't exist and the whole thing is cooked up, then it's like, oh shoot, I've been tricked the whole time. I mean, what do you
Yeah.
but I think for a lot of people, that this whole idea of questioning viruses, questioning virology, and maybe intentionally so, it's not even in their realm of thought. It's not even in their, so-called like Overton window. Like
Yeah.
it's been kept kind of outside. So most people don't even consider it. I mean, I've brought up the point in some interviews and things, and sometimes you're expecting to get a like, you're nuts. But sometimes I get a holy crap, I never even thought of that. I think with some people, it's not even remotely on their radar. They just would never have even thought about it because they're so focused on all this other explanations, like the lab leak and everything, and the bioweapons and the bioweapon labs and all this crazy stuff. And who knows what they're doing. I mean, maybe they're trying to make some of this stuff actually happen for real. I don't think you know there's absolutely the ability to create things in the lab that don't exist in nature or in reality. And
Mhm.
that's not to say that they're not trying to create things that don't exist or make these things true, but who knows?
I mean, I can imagine them playing around with like mold spores and
Mhm.
fungus and even bacteria, or even like the large phages and trying to like do weird crap, Frankenstein monstery to it. But the thing is, if they had figured it out, they've been doing this apparently a long time.
Mhm.
Uh, I think they would have already deployed it, and a lot of people would be dead. I think the only way they can hope is to get it into just consumption, perhaps that would make a bunch
Mhm.
of people violently ill to purge it. To purge the more of the biotoxins that the like mold makes a biotoxin. Lyme is a biotoxin. It has
Mhm.
nothing to do with the bacterial infection. It's the waste products that cause inflammatory processes and increase the evacuation of said products, right, where we get the symptoms.
Right.
So I can imagine they're trying to do stuff, and there's weird papers I still don't know what to make of when it comes to vaccination of like herd animals or horses, where they say that they can vaccinate a certain amount of the mares, and then all the rest of the herd also become passively vaccinated by being in their presence. That when I started reading that stuff, that was
Yeah.
concerning because I'm like, how does that? I don't get that. But they're saying it is so. And I actually had a friend who does like live blood analysis, And she was finding, like, she was testing all the blood of people who'd had the shots. And she was finding a new particle that was really weird, and she couldn't really place in any of her knowledge. And she kept finding it. And then she started testing the non-vaccinated people and finding it less so, but still finding it in those who were like, maybe their partner was vaccinated or they're working in an environment with a lot of them. So I wonder what if they have figured some sort of frequency set out, or I still am trying to understand what they could have possibly done, knowing what we know about, germs, as if you will, other than signaling to your own somatids or your own pleomorphic cells to become warped in some way or to harmonize with someone else. I mean, I'm still really contemplating it, but they're trying stuff. But that I think there was a study that said 60% or so of scientific studies are false or non-repeatable. That was like a meta-analysis. So it's actually quite high, false
Yeah,
science.
it's even higher than that, but
yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, this was probably a nice, prudent, let's not get fired sort of version of it. So
Well,
maybe
yeah.
sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no.
Well, I was just going to say, like, maybe what the solutions are, because I'm very solution based as well. I want to fix this in a way, or I want people to get away from the fear. And when you understand that you're in control, actually, and it's nothing about the outside in this random chaos. It's you putting it out, right? So that empowerment is super important. But also, we do want to help people to learn, and we also want a safe space for the scientists to leave. Maybe we need to formulate sort of like a new council of scientists, like what they did in 9/11 and stuff. Great, they had architects and engineers for 9/11. People who knew it was what it was, and similar for this MK Ultra style Agenda 2030 insanity that's going on. Maybe we need a collaboration, because it's more helpful maybe in numbers for people. Like, look at all of the scientists, because they seem to be trained to consensus science rather than real science. And we can at least use that to help people come to the knowledge, perhaps if we had some sort of organization or something where we were dedicated to creating more of these pure scientific studies.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. And I'm actually been talking to a few people about doing that sort of thing.
Oh, good.
So, because I think, like you said, I mean, we need to be able to do science, but real science, and so that we can get actually ask questions and conduct experiments, but do them in a proper manner. And there's a lot of things like the stuff that we're talking about that you're never going to be able to do inside the current system, for a lot of different reasons. And so how do we do that, right? And I think that the answer is decentralization and creating new systems. And I think it's possible, but we have to have groups like what you're describing to kind of think about how that all would work. And so yeah, I mean, I think that's very valuable, and I think there's definitely interest in doing stuff like that. And yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and also, we talk about the scientific method, and we're going to wrap it up here soon. But I just, wanted to touch on the whole scientific method understanding, and it is logical, that design. But one thing that I learned going through all of my training is there's more than one method to know if something is true or not, and we have pigeonholed ourselves into, this is the only way, this is the gold standard way, or this is it, right? And I think we're going to open up a whole new avenue of thought and and research that we can, so we can really know what is workable. Because a lot of this science is make work projects. It's not even necessary.
Mm-hmm.
Is it really advancing us? I mean, I don't see the evidence of that in the outer existence. Seems to be degrading quite quickly, actually.
Oh yeah.
So we need to get back to what we know, obviously, but then think forward in how could we design studies that are logical, but also are intuitive based, or have other ways of having experiential learning involved, or other knowledge, other ways of thinking about study design. What are your thoughts on the study design?
Well, yeah, I mean, most of what's done right now is all, it's all geared towards industry and developing drugs. And even there, I mean, there's no science. It's kind of ridiculous because it all winds up being about, a lot of checking the box just to get regulatory approval and get into a clinical trial. And I mean, you're like, this stuff doesn't make any sense. Well, but it's what's required for this and that. And so it's become mostly anti-science, just going through the motion and checking boxes. And you're not able to actually ask questions and explore things. And that's what we need.
Mm-hmm.
This whole idea that there's one way to do something or whatever, I mean, or is just absurd. I mean, science should be almost kind of an endless questioning and exploration. And there's so many ways that you can go about observing and doing different things. And um, yeah, I mean, it's kind of mind-boggling the place where it's gotten to, and that it's so far away from what it really should be. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, I mean, but I think there's a lot of, well, there's a tremendous amount of opportunity because of where we are right now is so bad.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's actually good. I think it's about time, my hope is that those who are coming out of the illusions, that they don't just stop short. Like, if we have an opportunity to build new societies, basically, because the old order is falling away, right? The new world disorder is creating chaos, and chaos is an opportunity for all who see, because
mhm,
you can create your own order from that too. We don't have to go in their order. We can make our ordering process. And when we work together and make good, solid foundations of truth, and then plant seeds in that soil, the societies will flourish in a more simple and elegant way, almost like how they used to be, really. But if people won't go all the way to the basement level, right? If they're just stopping at the
mhm,
lab leak story, or viruses are real story, or any of that, they're going to rebuild a society on the same problems that got us here in the first place. And this is what
mhm,
frustrates me to no end, when I have these freedom movements and things, and they're still, their jaws are still flapping about COVID this and that, and virus this and that. It's like, no, read the methodology sections of all of the white
mhm,
papers. They are not
mhm.
isolating shit. Okay. It's smoke and mirrors. So, you know, they, they're stuck. And I'd like to pray to ask our
Mhm,
heavenly creator to descend upon us the answer, of
mhm,
how we do this, because it's going to be Babylon all over again until we build from correction, ultimately. So I'm hoping that we'll have enough of a core group of, logical thinkers, who have enough IQ to do the job, who haven't poisoned themselves into a
mhm,
zombie-like drool stare, and we can build properly. And that's what I pray for and hope for, and work toward. And I know your taking great strides towards, this ideal as well. And I really thank you for, everything that you've done and just standing up and willing to throw your reputation away and throw the job away and just rip it apart, because I feel like we're here to do that. We're here to take the challenge by the teeth, and run with it. And we're going to be helping through a leadership role for others to be able to understand it and help them through. So I really thank you so much, Mike, for all that you're doing and continue to do. And I really have enjoyed this conversation. I stopped putting the little bloopity comments on because I noticed my internet is not that great in the forest here. So I was actually damaging the signal a little when I was doing that. So, but there are a lot of beautiful comments and congratulations and praise and gratitude. So I will, for those watching, I will be having to take it off YouTube, because I know that isn't it crazy though, Mike? I mean, seriously, like we can't talk about, they don't want us to talk about right there. People should go, oh, that's wrong. Like, that's wrong. It doesn't matter if you want to talk about something weird, as it's not hurting anybody. They think it is, but it's just a discussion. So we know that it threatens them for us to be gagged to this degree. So we will prevail. We will continue on. And any closing comments and where maybe you want to give your website, the Stillness in the Storm website, or that for your articles. And I do suggest people sign up to your newsletter, because I enjoy when your newsletters come, because I know there's something juicy, and I'm like, ooh, what's juicy in there? And it's not too many of them. Like, it's a good amount. Like, I can get to it. So so tell people where they can sign up for that.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me on, and giving me the opportunity to kind of share my story and all this. I mean, I've been really blown away by the amount of support I've gotten, and I think that just really continues to affirm to me that I made the right decision, and I'm connecting with so many amazing people like yourself, and so it just keeps kind of fueling my fire. And so, like you were saying, so I have this Substack newsletter that's called Still in the Storm. So stillinthestorm.substack.com or something like that. I'm not a very tech savvy scientist. I'll be right up in front. But I am on most social media for the time being, until they kick me off for saying something too bold or too much truth or whatever. But so you can find me on most all of the big ones, like Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, and then all the other alternative ones too, most generally under my name. And then I also have this Scientists for Health Freedom group that I started. It's mostly on Telegram, and some other places. Yeah.
Great. That's it. That's the foundation. That can be the starter foundation of scientists coming together. And, once you get a certain quorum, then you can take it to the next level. It's exciting times, really. We have all the opportunities now to stand in integrity and help people come through the illusions and land a bit softly away from
cushion
that soap opera. So I will give everyone the link so they'll have it, and your Telegram as well, because you're on there too. And thanks again so much. Thanks everyone for joining us and this conversation about truth and science. And just find us probably on Telegram, but Twitter's not been bad. Twitter's not punished us too terribly. It's weird because some do and some don't. And I don't understand why. Like, I can get away with more things on Instagram than I can on Facebook, but they're owned by the same company. Like, it's really strange. But at least the tweet is wrong. They'll say, are you sure? Like, do you want to delete that one?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
I had that last week.
Yeah, I had one last week too. Yeah. Are you sure you want to say that? Like, I really do, but yeah, I'll pull it out. Fine, that's fine. But we will have, our say on probably new platforms, because there's new ones coming all the time, and you can't suppress truth forever. It is always going to bounce back to the top. So we are riding that wave, and thanks again, everyone. Thank you, Mike. God bless, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Let's see.